You're listening to the Cyberwire Network, powered by N2K.
I think $1,000 for anyone is really kind of horrible, but there are incidents of folks losing hundreds of thousands of dollars to romance scams, for example. And when they're kind of clustered as billions of dollars of losses, or like users experience X, Y, and Z, it's really easy for us to forget that there are people behind these events, and the emotional impact, the mental impact is very, very real.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the CyberWire's Hacking Humans podcast, where each week we look behind the social engineering scams, phishing schemes, and criminal exploits that are making headlines and taking a heavy toll on organizations around the world. I'm Dave Bittner, and joining me is Joe Kerrigan from the Johns Hopkins University Information Security Institute. Hey, Joe.
Hi, Dave.
We got some good stories to share this week, and later in the show, we've got Selena Larson and Tim Utzik. We're talking about hunting down a Twitter scammer. But first, a word from our sponsors at KnowBe4. We're not talking conspiracy theory when we say it's all connected. When it comes to InfoSec tools, effective integrations can make or break your security stack. Though not as common, the same should be true for security awareness training. Not only does KnowBe4 deliver the world's largest library of security awareness training, but they also provide a way to integrate the various elements of your existing security stack to help you strengthen your organization's security culture. Stay with us, and in a few minutes, we'll hear from our sponsors at KnowBe4 about how you can integrate security awareness with your tech stack like never before. All right, Joe, before we jump into our stories, we've got a good bit of follow-up here this week.
Yes.
You want to kick things off for us?
First thing I want to talk about, the wildfires in Hawaii.
Yeah.
That is going to be scams.
Right.
Okay, so don't fall for those. If you're going to give money to Hawaii, if you want to help support Hawaii, the state of Hawaii actually has on their website places where you can go and give money.
Yeah.
You can also give to the Red Cross. They're helping.
Right.
I think the state of Hawaii is saying give to the United Way of Hawaii.
Okay.
That's what they're doing.
I saw someone say, whatever you do, don't come to Hawaii.
Yeah.
we do not need you here.
Yeah.
We have enough people.
Stay away from disaster areas until it's time to rebuild and they need volunteers, and there's a call for volunteers.
There you go.
That's when you go help.
Yeah.
But right now is not the time.
Yeah. Okay.
Steve writes in with some comments about the quiz I gave you last week from our last episode.
Uh-huh.
He says, I like the quiz you both presented in the most recent episode, and I laughed at the end because of that final question about Facebook, and this is about the Facebook lawsuits. When you read the question, I hit panic mode.
Okay.
I did get this email, and I responded to create a claim, but as you presented the question and discussed it, I freaked out a little and thought I might have fallen for a scam. Of course, it all works out in the end. I had a good laugh at myself and paranoia that can easily be induced from this business.
Yeah.
Yes. I think I came into this business with a bunch of paranoia, so I think I'm well suited for it.
Yeah, a little healthy paranoia is not a bad thing, but you just got to be careful to not let it run away with you.
No, that's right. I hope that we didn't scare you too badly, Steve.
Yeah. We got an email from Jonathan Daigle, who wrote in, and he was commenting on a couple episodes ago, we were talking about some Google Maps scams, and that people had been able to go into Google Maps and change the phone numbers on things. Yeah. And evidently, Jonathan used to be a Google Map editor.
Really?
Yeah. So he wrote in, I'm going to summarize here, but he said that Google Maps gathers information from various sources, including user input through Google accounts. One method is through a community of map editors who validate edits. Users can also claim businesses to edit them directly, although he thinks that process has changed some over time. And unclaimed listings can be open to edits from anyone. So as I said, Jonathan was once a Google Maps regional reviewer, which is part of a volunteer group that approves the user-submitted map updates.
Uh-huh.
And of course, high-profile areas require a special approval, like you can't rename the White House or,
Right. You need to have Yankee White clearance to do that.
Right, exactly. So
I would name it Casablanca.
Yeah. So Jonathan suspects that the scammers altered the airline's phone number through some clever strategies in multiple accounts, maybe manipulating good edits before changing the phone number. And he suspects it involves some sort of organized, centralized scam.
Probably.
So, yeah. So interesting insights. And thank you, Jonathan, for writing in. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Jonathan.
All right. Let's jump into our stories here, Joe. Why don't you kick things off for us?
Dave? They got me, Dave.
Oh, no.
My story comes from my own personal life.
Oh, no.
Now, I'm going to tell you, I have not suffered any losses.
Okay.
But I'm going to let you take a guess as to how they got me, and it's something we complain about on the show a lot. So
Okay.
I'm going to give you that hint.
All right.
So what was the mechanism through which they got me?
All right. I'm ready.
Take a guess.
You just want me to cold guess?
Okay, yeah, cold guess. Sorry.
You're giving me no information.
No information.
And you just want me to guess.
Yes.
All right.
Because if I give
going-
you any information, you'll instantaneously know how they did it.
Okay. I'm going to guess that someone came at you using something that you are already interested in to pique your interest and lower your defenses.
No.
Okay.
Close. You're close. Yeah, I mean, generally speaking, you might be right. So here's what's going on.
Okay.
My family, we're planning a family trip up to West Virginia, where my wife's family is from.
Okay.
So I have to rent a nearby hotel.
Uh-huh.
So what do?
Get online to find one.
Right. Now,
Okay.
I know there's a hotel right by the house where we're going to be gathering.
Okay.
So I say to the big machine in my phone, hey, I need to make a reservation. Hey, give me the website for this hotel.
Okay.
And I click on the link.
Uh-huh.
And I start making a reservation for the room.
Uh-huh.
Now, I'm looking at the prices of the room. My son is also making his reservation for the room
Okay.
because he's going up as well. He and his daughter are going up.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at the reservations. I'm like, these are some good prices, but they're not out of line with what I've seen before. You know, my daughter and her husband are saying prices are going up. And I'm like, hey, I'm not seeing that. And I say the price, and my son goes, that's a really good price. How are you getting that price? I'm like, I'm just on the website. Do. Dave, I wasn't on their website.
Okay.
Now do you know how they got me, Dave?
Yes, you clicked through the link. Yes.
I clicked on the ad.
You did what you tell everyone not to do, Joe.
I did. I went as far as entering my credit card information, and it comes back and goes, no, that credit card information didn't work. I checked the credit card information again and enter it again. Dave, I was persistent in my mistake here.
Okay.
And
Have you canceled that credit card?
I start to go, what's going on here? And I look up at the URL. I finally take the time to look up at the URL, and it has some BS reservation website.
Okay.
And I'm like, oh, no. And my son looks over and goes, you have a podcast about not doing this.
Yeah.
He's ever helpful, my son. I love the boy. but-
Cobbler's kids have no shoes.
Yes. He said, you didn't just, he says, what are you going to do about this? You're a big-time cybersecurity expert.
Uh-huh.
You're famous. And I say, well, you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about this on the show.
I see. So you weren't getting scammed. You were gathering content for the show.
That's right, Dave. That'll make me feel better.
There you go.
No, so I'm going to give a shout out here to the credit card company. This was Capital One.
Yeah.
I have a credit card with them.
Okay.
I called them immediately after I realized what was going on, and there's a voice message.
Did you use the phone number on the back of the card?
I used the
or did you Google
phone
it?
number on the back of the card. That's exactly what I did, and that's what everybody should do. I'm like, I'm not falling for this one again.
Okay.
So I put the phone number, I turn the phone over, and I call Capital One, I enter my information, and they go, hey, we've noticed some recent fraudulent activity on your account.
Uh-huh.
And I was
within
like,
the past
yeah.
5 minutes?
Yeah, that's right. Sure, that is exactly what has happened. So I get a representative pretty quickly, and the guy says, yeah, I see it here. They didn't approve anything, so
Oh, good.
I didn't lose any money. Capital One didn't lose any money.
Right.
They flagged it right away, and the guy said, we'll have a new card out to you very soon.
Oh, good.
The whole event is over, so it ends very well for me, right? We tell story after story after story where people lose money on this thing, on these
Yeah.
kind of things. I want to tell people, my main reason for telling this story is we have stories. In fact, our interview today is a very similar example of the courage that a lot of people have
Yeah.
We've had stories about people who have lost hundreds of thousands of dollars, and despite the absolute embarrassment, I'm incredibly embarrassed about entering my credit card information into a wrong site, right? But I would be remiss if I didn't come here and say things like, tell people, this happens to even the best of us, Dave. This happens to everybody, right? You are not immune to falling for this. And we have said this over and over and over again on this show. And one of the things, when you and I started this show, I made a commitment to myself that I would never say, that's not something, I'm never going to fall for any of this stuff because I'm too smart for that. Because obviously I'm not.
Right.
And I live and breathe this field, this career field.
Yeah.
This is pretty much all I think about. This happened to me. So if you get scammed, do not be embarrassed. I know, well, you're going to be embarrassed, but don't be afraid to share your story. I know it's embarrassing. Don't be afraid to share your story.
Yeah. And there's a whole spectrum of embarrassment. I mean, there's, gosh, I would put this up there with, I don't know, leaving your fly down or something, like nothing. It's not, it's not a big deal. Like, oh gosh, silly me, no harm, because you didn't lose any money. Right. It was corrected. The system worked, right? The credit card company caught it.
Right.
Yep. And you learned a lesson.
And I got off easy.
Yeah, the other sort of little tiny side technical note that I'll add here is that with a lot of these websites, for example, when you're entering your credit card information, you don't even have to hit submit for that information to have been captured.
Correct. 100% correct.
Yeah.
When you're entering that stuff, there could be JavaScript in the background that is sending that information along as it's being entered.
Yeah.
That website may have essentially a keylogger on it in built-in JavaScript, which might be loading that information up.
Right.
It may not be actually accessing your keyboard, but it is accessing every single change you make to that field.
Yeah. Yep. All right. Well, all's well that ends well.
Yes.
Well
enough.
I'm glad you dodged that bullet, but as you say, it can happen to anybody.
Yes.
It can happen to the best of us, and it can happen to you.
Thanks. I have one other note that a listener named George sent in.
Okay.
It's not really exactly social engineering, but the Bank of Ireland recently, The Guardian we all have a link to this in the show notes, but the Guardian has a story about the Bank of Ireland having a glitch in their ATM system or their account system that let people withdraw too much money from their accounts. It wasn't there.
Oh.
And apparently there were lines at ATMs once the word got out.
Right.
Some of the Garda, the Irish police, were actually dispatched to ATMs to stop this from happening. I think that the Bank of Ireland is going to get a fine for this, but everybody who withdrew their accounts is still on the hook for the money.
Yeah.
Don't think when these kind of things happen that it's free money.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
the
just
odds are always in the house's favor.
Right. The bank is the house in this case.
Yeah. Yeah. My story this week actually comes from the FBI. This is from the folks over at the IC3, the Internet. What is it? The Internet
Crime Complaint Center.
Complaint Center. Thank you, Joe. And they put out an alert a few days ago. This is about cyber criminals targeting victims through mobile beta testing applications. So, sounds like what's happening here is people are saying, as part of a scam, people are saying, hey, here's a way for you to get the latest version of this hot app that you want to be part of. And it could be either an app that has limited access.
Right.
It's something that actually is only at an invite-only mode right now.
Really? Can I take a guess at what they ask you to do?
Sure.
Do they ask you to enable your developer options on your phone?
I don't know, and I don't think this article says that, but basically what this is getting at is that they're actually using the beta testing functionality built into, for example, the Google Play Store.
Okay.
And
so you're using the Google Play Store, they're probably not asking you to sideload the app, is what that's called.
Right. So what this does is it allows you to load the app, but it will not have gone through the scrutiny that most apps go through, or that I guess every app goes through, either through Google Play or the Apple App Store. And so because of that, these apps can be full of all kinds of things that'll do all sorts of terrible things to your system. And so you have a false sense of security because it's still coming through the Google Play Store, but it's coming through the beta program of the Google Play Store where it has not been tested.
Right.
So this article has a nice list of some red flags for malicious apps that talk about it draining your battery faster than usual. That indicates that it's busy processing some things behind the scenes. If your computer's running slow, again, that can be linked to the heat as well. Right. Pop-up ads, a bunch of downloads, apps that request permission that have nothing to do with what that app actually does. Flashlight app doesn't need to know your location, right? And of course, the normal things: spelling errors, grammar errors, lack of details, pop-ups that look like ads, system warnings, reminders, things like that. So we'll have a link to this alert here from the FBI. But, it's a good reminder to be careful of where you're getting your apps from. Certainly for your mobile device, the best place is the official app stores. And, of course, on iOS, you can't sideload things unless you've jailbroken the device.
Right, yeah. It's very hard to do that.
Yeah, yeah.
So does Apple have a beta program, or do they not let you do that?
They do, yeah. They do have a beta program, yep. A developer can send you a link to be part of their beta program, and that allows you to load something that has not been reviewed yet.
All right, so here's another example of somebody using a tool or a system that's intended to do things that are necessary and good.
Yeah.
Right? Like if I'm an app developer and I have a following of people that use my app.
Right.
And I have a group of super users who are on forums and all that stuff. I mean, these kind of apps are not the majority of apps, right?
Right.
These are a small minority of apps that have these kind of followings. But those users, you may want to select some users from that community to be beta testers because they love your product, they're familiar with your product, and they want to help you make a better product.
Right.
So these beta programs are important to have, but here's the but, it's something that can be abused.
Yeah.
And that's what we're seeing here.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see if the app hosts, the app platforms, if they put in any additional layers of scrutiny in response to this, or if this is something that the folks it's interesting because what's happening here is the bad guys are spinning up a developer account.
Right. And you can spin up developer account after developer account.
Right, right. So maybe, again, it's hard to do at scale.
Right,
right?
Exactly.
How can we scrutinize the people applying for developer accounts?
Yep.
One by one.
The solution here is going to be the problem. Well, I don't know. The problem here is that this solution gets pushed down to the user. Mm-hmm. That the responsibility gets pushed down to the user because of these big tech companies not being able to manage this at scale, as you say. So we have to talk to our folks and say, don't get roped into a beta program unless you are a real fan of this software.
Yeah. And I think there is a social engineering component here because
absolutely
a lot of folks feel like, I'm being invited to this beta testing program.
Makes you feel important.
I'm elite. Yeah, I'm elite. So they get you that way too.
Mm-hmm.
All right, we will have a link to that in our show notes. Joe, it is time to move on to our catch of the day.
Dave, our catch of the day comes from Richard, who has some creative names for us. He says, "Hey, Joe, Kara Cash Coin, and Dave Bittner Coin.
Yeah.
I got a new tip on crypto. It's a hot one, potentially life-changing opportunity. Cue the Wolf on Wall Street scene, the one where DiCaprio keeps reiterating that he gets 50% commission."
All right, it goes like this. It says, "Hello, my name is Joseph Cole, Director of Operations at Crypto Dream.
All caps.
Some of my colleagues in other blockchain companies like Tether, Bitcoin asked me to look for a trustworthy person who has the capability to receive cryptocurrency that runs into millions of dollars when exchanged. They have many wallets whose owners can no longer be reached or identified. Some have died in the ongoing Russian-Ukrainian war by accidents or even natural disasters. without any next of kin in their mandates with the companies. If you can work with us, you will be entitled to 25% of whatever amount we move out per time. This deal can be concluded in a week with your cooperation. Revert very quickly if you think you are that person we are to work with. Best regards, Joseph Cole. So, what does revert very quickly mean?
I don't know.
Obviously, it's it's
Translation error,
translated.
right?
Yeah,
It
but
means get back, go back very
get
quickly.
back to us. Yeah,
Yeah.
it probably means get back, respond.
It'd be interesting to know what language this came from, because this sounds like it's a colloquialism that doesn't translate well.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
If anybody knows what revert very quickly would mean in this in another language, but it is a colloquialism, we'd love to know it.
Yeah.
So I don't know what happens here. This could be a just a kind of a play on the advanced fee scam.
Yeah, I'll
like
bet
if
it
you
is.
if you
Yeah.
respond to them, you say, "Yeah, sure, I can do that," and they go, "Well, send us some Bitcoin, and we know you're legit." Right?
Yep. Could be that they're money muling you.
Could be they're money muling you,
Yeah.
using you as a step in the money laundering operation, and they're promising you 25%.
Yeah.
Okay, that sounds great. If I get tied to this money, then that's going to be bad. That's going to end badly for me.
Right. All right. Well, thank you, Richard, for sending that in. Of course, we would love to hear from you. You can email us. It's hackinghumans@n2k.com. Back to the concept of integrations. KnowBe4's Security Coach uses standard APIs to quickly and easily integrate with your existing security products from vendors like Microsoft, CrowdStrike, Cisco, and dozens of others. Security Coach analyzes alerts your security stack generates to identify events related to any risky security behavior from your users. With this information, you can set up real-time coaching campaigns to target risky users based on those events from your network, endpoint, identity, or web security vendors. These campaigns enable you to coach your users at the moment the risky behavior occurs, with contextual security tips delivered via Microsoft Teams, Slack, or email. With 35 integrations and counting, Security Coach delivers the insight you need to improve your organization's security culture. Learn more about Security Coach at knowbe4.com/securitycoach. That's knowbe4.com/securitycoach. Joe, I recently had a really interesting conversation with Selena Larson, who is a threat researcher. I've interviewed her several times over on the Cyberwire. And a friend of hers, whose name is Tim Utzig, and he's a business analyst. Tim found himself victimized by some bad guys, and Selena used her magical powers as a threat researcher to help him track down the bad guys. Here's my conversation with Selena Larson and Tim Utzig.
So Tim is a friend of mine. We are part of a running group where sighted athletes guide blind runners, and we've become friends through our running group. And one day he was telling me the story of how he got scammed by someone on Twitter, supposedly selling laptops. One of the accounts that he follows and is friends with was hacked and used as a way to sort of share the scam. I, of course, was really upset, and working in my day job as a cybersecurity practitioner, I thought, hey, this isn't cool. Let's see if we can potentially find maybe the folks behind this, see if we can get your money back, or at the very least, put together some resources for law enforcement so Tim can report the crime and we can provide some additional information that might help law enforcement in their search.
Well, Tim, set the stage for us here. I mean, how did you fall into this? Where did it all begin?
So when I was an undergraduate at Towson University studying journalism, I met a reporter named Raku Bako, who works for Masson covering the Baltimore Orioles. And from that, I began following him closely as a fan of the Baltimore Orioles. And without knowing his Twitter account had been hacked, he was selling MacBooks that were going proceeds to charity. and I was not aware he was hacked. I'm blind and use a screen reader. And so I missed some key details that kind of would have set off alarm bells for his account having been taken over. Fell for the scam and gave $1,000 to a person and via Apple Cash to a person that ended up not being the reporter.
So just to be clear here, this reporter was unaware that his Twitter account had been taken over by scammers, and they were using that to pretend to be selling laptops?
That's correct, yes.
Yeah. So you find yourself falling victim to this. It must have been a terrible feeling.
It was awful. It was gut-wrenching for several weeks. It was an awful feeling until I got in contact with WMAR from Baltimore and Selena, just telling her the story. I felt very alone until they reassured me that this happens to a lot of people. But for several hours, if not days there, it felt very alone, especially you feel stupid. You feel like, you should have seen warning signs. You talk to friends and family, and they saw that it was a scam being reported other places, but I didn't happen to see that. And it's so gut-wrenching as well, having a disability and not being able to see some of the signs that were out there that my other peers would have seen.
Yeah. So, Selena, Tim mentions this to you. Did you immediately leap into action?
Tim told me what happened, and I pretty much did. Yeah. So I told him, send me screenshots, send me the articles, send me more information about the information that you have. I contacted a friend of mine who is an expert in social engineering and basically being able to track down scammers and see, try and identify people behind scams. And so I got with Tim. I got the information that he had, and then I coordinated with my friend who in the article is referred to as Steve. And we got to hunting through data, looking for information and trying to see if we could sort of piece together the puzzle of the fraud itself, potentially other victims, other incidents of this, what some of their accounts were, just a lot, trying to kind of piece together the overall scam in a way that we might be able to identify the who, the how, and potentially inform law enforcement.
Well, it's a fascinating story. Can you walk us through the process that Steve used here to try to track these folks down?
Absolutely. So when you are hunting fraudsters and working kind of against social engineers, you become a social engineer yourself. So what's really interesting is engaging with the actor. So initially, Tim gave us a phone number, right? So the initial contact was on Twitter, but it switched to iMessage. So all we had was a phone number. We texted that phone number saying, hey, I heard you're selling laptops. I'm interested in getting one. We got a text back from a different number. So immediately we had two indicators, right? Indicators of suspicious activity. So then we were chatting with the person saying, we're interested in this. In Tim's case, the cash transaction happened via Apple Cash. But in our case, we were initially messaging them not on an iPhone. So they're like, okay, what payment platforms can we use? We said we would be able to pay in Bitcoin, via Zelle app, which is a payment app, via Square app, or via PayPal. So essentially what we're doing is we're telling them, okay, these are the ways that I can pay to see if they will send us payment accounts. Payment accounts are another way for people to be able to sort of track the actor, right? So Bitcoin is another one. You can track wallets. You can track usernames, personal information associated with various payment accounts. A lot of times people are using real names associated with their payment accounts, email addresses potentially. And what we were able to do is sort of piece together profiles of potential people involved in the scam based off of information gleaned through the chats, the one-on-one conversations, based off of the payment accounts that we were able to identify associated with names of apparent real people, whether or not those payment accounts were part of a money mule operation or part of the scam itself is not clear. But we were able to identify sort of a cluster of apparent related activity related to the scam.
What about location information? Did you have any sense of where these folks were operating?
Sure. So we had phone numbers, which of course include area codes. They were US-based phone numbers. So there was the potential for that. There was certainly people's social media footprints suggested various locations. We were able to sort of zero in on locations in the East Coast. We also sent a link through a tool called the Grabify app. This is actually something, Grabify links are kind of similar to, for instance, what advertisers use to track people's activity online, right? So you can get an IP address, the geolocation of a user, some information about the user agent, like what device are they on. And so we were able to see someone click that. So at the time of click, we were able to identify that they were in the Eastern United States. And we were able to, again, get some additional information on at least the device itself and potentially associated with the user who is, appears to be at least somewhat involved in this overall fraud.
And so you gather all of this information. What do you do with it? Do you report it to law enforcement?
Yeah, so there's an IC3 portal that the FBI provides and encourages people to report fraud. There also, and Tim can talk to maybe about this a little bit as well, but we also were able to, I worked with Tim to get a police report filed detailing all of the information that he had as well as the information that I had. Unfortunately, a lot of times these crimes go unpunished. There's a lot of fraud that happens. And if you look at public statistics of fraud, some of the tracking information, certainly the IC3 report that's published every year, there's hundreds of millions of dollars in losses, whether that's business email compromise, whether that's consumer fraud, romance scams, pig butchering is a big, big one. So there's obviously a lot of this crime that's happening, and there aren't great public statistics on whether or not they're prosecuted or whether or not, the people behind these activity are caught, basically.
Mm-hmm. Tim, what was it like for you with your interactions with the DC Metropolitan Police Department? Was it gratifying? Did you feel as though they were taking you seriously?
I felt it was a bit disappointing. I spent weeks, days waiting for responses that never came. When I first finally got in contact after about 3 weeks to a month with the person in charge of the financial crimes unit, he forwarded it off to what seemed to be someone junior down on the financial crimes team. And we went back and forth. He asked for details. Selena was involved in the conversation, giving him every bit of evidence we had. And since then, I've gone about 2-3 emails without a response and just figured they've kind of moved on.
Yeah. I share your frustration in that it seems as though, I don't know if it's because it's not a violent crime, but at the same time, and you certainly feel violated, but it just seems like law enforcement isn't really set up to have any sort of nimble response to this.
Absolutely not. And I try to explain to them the gravity of the situation, at least to me, $1,000 to some people might not be just but a drop in the bucket, but for someone like me who's pursuing graduate school and living in DC, it's a big deal, and to be taken advantage like that. And I wish something like this, they'd have the manpower to pursue things like this. But unfortunately, that wasn't the case, and it's very frustrating.
Yeah. And you also reported it to the FBI's IC3, the Internet Crime Complaint Center?
Yeah, absolutely. Selena helped me out with that. Selena has been a big help, her and her team, getting this reported all over the place and getting this to the point it's gotten today, and even being on this podcast here today. She helped me go through the FBI system, and we'll see what comes of that, if anything.
Has there been much response after the story went live on Wired?
I mean, being on this podcast today for me is a big deal. Selena, I don't know as far as what you've seen on your end. I know I was on vacation and she sent me the article along, and then I saw everything online around it. And to me, it was a big deal.
Yeah, we've gotten a lot of really positive feedback. I think there is interest. So you mentioned, some challenges with law enforcement. There is definitely interest in sort of, bridging some of those knowledge gaps, helping victims of these types of crimes. I know that there are a lot of folks in the community that, try and work either independently or through various nonprofits to help people who have been victims of crime, whether that's fraud, whether that's privacy and sort of surveillance, cybersecurity training for things like that. That might be more of digital threats, other types of digital threats. But the response has been overall really positive. I think as cybersecurity practitioners, people in the community, we very often lose sight of the people behind these crimes. Even in the conversations or the blogs that we publish or the tweets that we make, we call them users, right? I think user sometimes dehumanizes the individuals behind the computer, right? So they're victims of crime. These are human beings. They are people. And, every one of them is having a uniquely terrible experience. The impact really varies. For Tim, $1,000 is a huge loss. I think $1,000 for anyone is really kind of horrible. But there are incidents of folks losing hundreds of thousands of dollars to romance scams, for example. And when they're kind of clustered as billions of dollars of losses or like users experience X, Y, and Z, it's really easy for us to forget that there are people behind these events, and the emotional impact, the mental impact is very, very real. And so I think that that's been, at least for me, a lot of the positive feedback I've seen is really giving humanity to cybercrime. And Tim was very, very generous in sharing his story. I know it can be really hard for victims of crime to come forward and discuss it. And Tim has been extremely brave, extremely forthcoming, helped me learn a lot about his end of things and the experience itself. And also, hopefully, our story can help other people realize that A, this stuff happens, and B, it's okay to talk about it. C, you're not alone.
Yeah. Tim, help us understand here, as someone who is blind, I think a lot of us don't realize the types of things that you experience when you're interacting with technology. And some of these things may put you at a disadvantage when it comes to being able to spot these scams.
Absolutely. I mean, first and foremost, technology is not made for people with disabilities, and therefore technology is not made for people who are blind and visually impaired. And being blind is a spectrum. So these things have been retroactively added, things like Zoom, things like VoiceOver just on an iPhone, and later on things similar nature on Android. But it still is not completely proof for people with disabilities. I constantly have to find myself going into the Apple store on Apple support, each coming iOS update, trying to talk about why VoiceOver now won't read text messages or read articles or will just glitch out every other month. And someone who's sighted doesn't have to go through, why can't I just use my phone and read text every other month? And so these are things that people like me have to think about. Now, granted, technology's in a great place these days where it was being blind 15, 20 years ago, but it's still frustrating. And when you have to use something like VoiceOver and say reading a picture, not all things have alt text that a screen reader will read. And so if there's something off about a picture, for instance, and it doesn't read the alt text, then you could be misled as to what that picture is actually presenting.
I have to wonder, given the amount of information that you were gathering here on these bad guys, was there ever a moment where you had an impulse that, we're going to show up on their front doors, or we're going to try to get down to that point and say, hey, give me my money back, or give me a computer?
I'm sure Selena could probably speak to this, but especially after her and her team helped me track down these people and give the information over to law enforcement, it was so hard, even with the phone number I had initially that I was originally in contact with, to not just reach back out and, say, gosh, I hate you. I can't believe you did this to me. Give me my money back. But I had to walk away, bite my tongue, and just move on. And it's extremely frustrating.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of security researchers and folks who operate in this space definitely feel that compulsion of like, oh my gosh, like, I just want to talk to them and tell them how bad they are, and try to sort of engage with the baddies, so to speak. Obviously, you really shouldn't, because that could go very badly. But also, in our case, we're not law enforcement. We can't do that. We've done all we can in terms of seeing what we can do with the tools available, with the resources that we have, and the techniques that we're using. But you bring up a really good point, because folks who do this a lot, who engage with victims of crime a lot, also suffer from mental health issues often. And it is really, really difficult. It's hard to watch people suffer. It's really hard to constantly engage with people when they're at their lowest. at BrunchCon last year, Ronnie Tukowski gave a really great talk on the importance of taking care of yourself, the importance of focusing on mental health, basically highlighting that our jobs as security researchers can be really stressful, especially, if you are doing victim engagement and talking to people who have been victims of crime. And his presentation was really terrific and talked a lot about some of the resources that he uses to keep himself centered and healthy, because it is hard, and I think calling it cybersecurity or even talking about it as something that only happens on the internet, we forget that this is real life, There's human beings in physical places that are experiencing this, and it can be, it's easy to forget that when we're so focused on the malware and the TTPs.
Right. Well, Tim, thank you so much for sharing your story. And Selena, thank you so much for helping Tim and also sharing your part of the story with us. Joe, what do you think?
First things first, Dave. Go O's. You started off talking about being Orioles fans and watching Masson.
There you go.
Now that I've said that, watch the Orioles fall out of first place, and it'll all be my fault. Like I said before about my story, in my story, Tim coming forward is courageous. It's hard to do that, especially when you've actually lost money. So I thank you, Tim, for sharing your story. This is very important that you do. I'm glad that you enjoy being on the show. And if you're listening to this, you have my undying admiration for coming forward like this.
Yeah.
This starts with a Twitter account takeover. This is why I keep saying to people that you have things of value. Even if you don't think that you would fall for a scam, the fact that someone thinks it's you may cost somebody money. Mm-hmm. And how's that going to affect your relationship? I never actually say that explicitly in my talks. I think I might actually start. I'm going to add that to my list of reasons why you care about cybersecurity. Because believe it or not, Dave, sometimes people still say to me, I have nothing that anybody wants.
Yeah.
And that's not true.
Yeah. Being
blind, you don't have access to some of the information. You're missing a large portion of it.
Right.
And Tim talks about that throughout this interview. And I totally get that. I mean, I'm not being, I wear glasses. That's as close as it gets for me, right?
Yeah,
so I can see everything. But I mean, just imagine not being able to get all the visual cues that you get from a page.
Well, there's so many things we take for granted.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Tim makes a point about, he's talking about screen readers, and he touches on the idea of alt text for images. That like newspapers will put in their articles, they'll have alternate text that describes the picture.
Right.
So if you're using a screen reader, the screen reader can look for that alternate text and tell you what's in it.
Yeah.
The bad guys are never going to enter or provide alternate text. And it's not because they specifically want to go after blind people. It's just because they don't even think about that.
They're lazy.
They're lazy.
Right.
And they're going to do, they're not going to do it because it's more effort for them. And they really want to get these scams up and running and operational as fast as they can.
Yeah.
So alt text takes up time. However, that being said, I do want to note that there is a possibility that people could use this to target blind people by providing misleading alternate text. It's another place for social engineering to attack. I mean, and this goes without saying, but that kind of a person is a despicable person, but they exist.
Yeah.
One of the things that also sticks with me is that Tim says he feels stupid. I felt stupid this week when what happened to me. So I totally get that. And Tim lost $1,000, and that has a lot of impact. If I lost $1,000, I would be enraged.
Yeah, of course.
Try not to feel stupid, though. Even when this happens to you, it's not happening to you because you're stupid. It's happening to you because terrible people are doing something awful to you.
Yeah.
That's what's happening.
Right, and you're human.
Yeah. Right? Enter Selena and Steve, and they go hunting. I like this terminology a lot. They start interacting with the scammer, and I like that they're interacting with the scammer, trying to social engineer him. That's pretty good. They then start gathering a bunch of information about them. They use the Grabify link that lets you find out where they are and find out that they're kind of operating close by on the East Coast of the United States.
Yeah.
Now, they could be coming out of a VPN.
Sure.
That's very possible. They could also be here on the East Coast somewhere. And they build up a collection of information that they can then hand over to law enforcement. Now, Tim talks about his interactions with law enforcement and says he finds that he is disappointed with law enforcement, to which I say, shocker. I recently talked about my son's ATM experience, and I don't recall if I talked about my interaction with law enforcement, but this was with the Howard County Police, and I found them to be very indifferent to the situation. Now, the loss to my son, actually to my son's bank, was $400.
Yeah.
And they made him whole. So it wasn't a big deal. But when I went over to the Community Engagement Center, right, and first off, the door's locked. So you know what? I'm not going to go on a tirade, right?
Yeah, that'd be good. Let's stay on Tim and
stay on Tim's story. I'm not surprised. Suffice it to say, I'm not surprised that Tim was disappointed in law enforcement's response.
Yeah.
A lot of times these things don't rise to their level of attention until they reach a certain dollar threshold.
Right.
And part of the problem is, and we've talked about this before, is that the amount of fraud that goes on in what you would consider to be low dollar area from a law enforcement perspective, but from a personal perspective is a high dollar area, like $1,000. There's tons of that going on.
Yeah, and it's not a violent crime.
And it's not a violent crime, right? Yeah. Selena makes a really good point about the dehumanizing of the victims here when we call them users that get targeted by this. These are people being hurt here when this happens. And we need to remember that as a society, as an industry, particularly in the cybersecurity industry.
Yeah.
And to Selena's point that, yeah, sometimes it can be hard to sit here and listen to all these stories.
You have to be deliberate to not find yourself getting callous to
right.
them.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
And that's something I have to watch myself with, Dave.
It's hard.
It is.
So many of them.
Right.
And to Selena's point, you don't want to dehumanize people. You don't want them to just become statistics because they're real people. People like Tim.
Yeah.
He's a real $1,000 is a lot of money.
Yes.
All right. Well, our thanks to Selena Larson and Tim Utzig for joining us. We do appreciate them taking the time. We want to thank all of you for listening, and of course, we want to thank our sponsors at KnowBe4. They are experts at enabling a fully integrated approach to security awareness training. That is our show. We want to thank all of you for listening. Our thanks to the Johns Hopkins University Information Security Institute for their participation. You can learn more at isi.jhu.edu. N2K Strategic Workforce Intelligence optimizes the value of your biggest investment, your people. We make you smarter about your team while making your team smarter. Learn more at n2k.com. Our senior producer is Jennifer Iben. The show is edited by Elliot Peltzman. Our executive editor is Peter Kilpie. I'm Dave Bittner.
And I'm Joe Kerrigan.
Thanks for listening.